I'm being joined by someone you perhaps not seen in a while on your TV screen and in public, a former Minister of Youth Development, a former Minister of Sport, a governorship aspirant in Kwara State, a former commissioner, is serving a party administrator. Mr. Bolaji Abdullahi joins us live here in our Abuja studio. Thanks so much indeed.
Thank you very much.
It's good to see you.
It really
It's quite a while.
Really, I'm glad
you sneaked all public out of the public eyes.
Exactly. Sometimes you just have to, there's always time for everything.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Thank you.
Let's begin looking at the state of the nation generally. You get a feel as a politician, of course, you're hearing what your people are saying back at home, and you see what is going on the street of Nigeria and seeing what is happening, the socio-economic issues in the country. Give me a sense of what you feel is going on in the country.
Well, thank you very much. What I feel is that Nigerians do not appear prepared for the kind of situations that we found ourselves. When the government came on board and some measures were being introduced, those measures were intended to move the country forward, to deliver on the promises that they made when they take power. But what didn't happen was to prepare Nigerians for the unintended consequences of some of those actions that necessarily need to be taken. Because you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. So it is in the breaking of the omelette that those kind of situations arise where difficulties. Because like I said recently, Nigerians really don't care much about some things. Nigerians don't care whether you are flying your private jets or whatever. As long as they can enter their Marwa and move from one point to another, or enter a filling station and buy fuel and move from one point to another. They don't care about your Louis Vuitton or Versace bag, as long as they can open their poly bag and find food in it, right? So it's when that becomes difficult that all kind of questions begin to come up, and they begin to look at the kind of tie you are wearing, begin to look at the cost of your wristwatch, So I think government need to do more of engaging. Government need to do more of talking to the people, to let government know if we are suffering, why are we suffering, and how long will this take? Then it becomes more endurable.
For someone who's had experience at a state level, and someone who's gone up to the federal level, you've had an experience also. That those are two different things, and governance, but they are different levels. And you begin to feel the heat the more, the higher you go. And the lower you go, sometimes you feel that the heat could be less, but it's not. Yeah. So you find out that maybe when you go to the national level, the heat might be lesser, but it's not. Yeah. It looks like you're getting nearer to the heat. So none of these atmosphere gives you a sense of rest when you are in government. Do you have a feeling that Nigeria becomes a very difficult entity to deal with, considering the kind of promises and the capacity the Tinubu government and the kind of caliber of people that we have seen in this government, what it came with?
I think you are correct to a very large extent. But I think the problem is that Nigeria has found itself in a situation where whoever is going to undertake the responsibilities for developing Nigeria or improving the quality of lives of the people will have to do so many things at the same time, right? But because you have to do so many things at the same time, you create pockets because for every situation that you try to tackle, there will be gainers and there will be losers. If you say, okay, we don't like the way things are being run at the moment, and you want to change the status quo, some people are benefiting from the status quo, so they will be losers when you bring about change, right?
And those forces will somehow fight back.
They will push back, right? So, and you cannot identify, the complexity of it is that you cannot identify one factor and tell yourself that once I deal with this single factor, then others will fall in place. You have to do so many things at the same time. And by doing many things at the same time, you are also creating different pockets of resistance, different pockets of disenchantment and disillusion and anger and annoyance and disappointment. And that is why a democratic government never stops campaigning, right? Never stops talking to the people. Because the biggest challenge that any government will have, including the Tinubu administration, is how do we make the people to trust the government? When the government said this is the sacrifice we need to make, or this is the pains we have to suffer, how will we make the people to follow the government? So that is the biggest. Do
you think it's perhaps the government that has the quickest or the fastest kind of disapproval rating with the people?
It's possible to look at it that way, but you also have to look at the kind of responsibilities that they will have to undertake, right? I say, look, if you look back, 1999, we have dealt with the issue of lack of electricity. We've always dealt with it. If you listen to some fella songs in the 70s, we've always dealt with the issue of lack of electricity. We've always dealt with the issues of public infrastructure in one way or the other. Now, I think where this administration, where we can single out this administration for some kind of targeting, is that there are some decisions that ought to be carefully calibrated. We didn't see that. For example, when you announce the removal of fuel subsidy, and at the same time you take a policy of floating the naira, so it's like you create a perfect incendiary, that targets the livelihood of the people. Those are necessary things you needed to do, right? I'm not saying that they were wrong. Those were the right things you needed to do.
Which people have clamored for. But governments have been too scared to take because of political reasons.
Absolutely. But the people clamoring for it, were they aware of the pains that will follow those actions being taken? And that is why the basic idea in reforms is you have to ask yourself, can the system absorb the heat that is coming when we take this action? And that's why we say some things that are policy smart may not be politically wise, right? And the most important thing for an elected government is staying in power. Because if you don't stay in power, you will not be able to deliver on the promises that you have made. So I think the good thing is that the situations are dynamic, and the government is happening early in the life of the administration. So the government has another 3 years to firm up. So I think if they are able to deliver some kind of results within the next 1 year, the story will change. So it doesn't matter what the people are saying now. What they need to do is to focus on delivering results.
Do you see light at the end of the tunnel, though?
Of course, I believe that if they stay on course and take some measures that are likely to tone down the direct exposure that the people are suffering from now, and able to get the confidence of the people in a way that people can understand that this is why government is doing what it's doing, and this is what we expect at the end of the day. I think it's possible.
I look at your book again, flipping through, and some of your experiences when you were working with former President Goodluck Jonathan, and perhaps one of the biggest political error ascribed to any government is the decision the president made at the time in wanting to remove subsidy, and the kind of uproar that caused. And that singular action swept that government out of power. Literally politically messed up that government, and that the government could not recover from. Sitting back in the cabinet at that time and looking at how the streets of Nigeria was reacting to some of these things, the same issue is now playing back itself, and you look at the same actors who played a major role anti that government are in power right now. Some of them are in power right now. What kind of memory does that give you? Deja vu or what?
Well, I mean, yes, maybe deja vu, but like the case that you referenced, the removal of fuel subsidy in January 2012, I mean, like you said, everyone agrees that that is the decision that needed to be taken. This fuel subsidy thing is not sustainable. Government needed to take action about it. If you recall, Nigerians were debating it, and government was engaging labor, engaging the civil society, engaging the media. But the problem happened when Nigerians woke up on January 1st, 2012, and had that the subsidy has been removed, an increase in the pump price of petrol. And don't forget, that was the time that youth all over the world were embarking on one kind of Occupy movement across the world.
Yeah.
So Nigerian youth were looking with longing, looking for opportunity to join that global outrage, right? So it's like the government then just gave the youth something to match
an air
and something to match for,
yeah.
right? you know. Of course, I mean, you can say that the people who are in government now were in the opposition. The opposition will do what opposition does, and now the people in opposition at that time are now in government, so they will also expect that opposition will do what opposition should do.
So you imagine when the present government says that they want to show some level of prudence and they want to show some activity, because I'm never going to be swayed in my life, being a political journalist, by activity in government and functionality of governance are two different things.
Absolutely.
You might be seeing activity
movements,
and no traction. And so when they say Oronsaye report will be implemented, there were a lot of claps. And that those who say, wait for a moment, what does this mean? When you heard that, and being in the APC, at the time when Nasir El-Rufai, the governor of Kaduna State, presented a report of true federalism to President Muhammadu Buhari, who saw that report and said, this is a way to go. It has to be implemented. You look at it, you think that the Tinubu government is moving in the right direction, or what exactly do you think?
Well, I mean, when I heard about the Steve Oronsaye report, I mean, I was in government at the time when the committee was inaugurated, and I had the opportunity to interact closely with members of the committee. There are two issues involved with the Steve Oronsaye committee report. One, the fundamental question is, what did the government aim to achieve with that committee? One is to reduce cost of governance. The other one is to make government more efficient and because at the moment the bureaucracy appeared to be to have a lot of redundancy, and there are so many people in the civil service at the moment not doing a lot of things. There are so many parastatal agencies that appear like they are duplications of each other. So when the government set up that committee, the idea is, one, by rationalizing those agencies and parastatal, can the government get the civil bureaucracy to function more efficiently? The second one is, can government reduce cost in the process? But what I've seen is that over the years, the Oronsaye committee report appeared to have assumed the status of platitude. Whenever the people complain about a cost of governance, then someone mentions the Oronsaye report. Don't forget that when that report was submitted, there are different review committees and panels that have been set up. There's one by my brother, Mohammed Bello Adoke, the one by Amapepu, and former heads of Professor Afolabi, former heads of service and all that. So they try to review it and all that. But don't forget also that during the Buhari administration, that report was dusted off, and the government announced that they were going to implement the committee report. But now here we go again. If I am to advise the president, I think somebody must be telling the president that, okay, one way to reduce cost of governance is to implement this Oronsaye report. And that is why people are asking, if you are saying that the Oronsaye report will help you to reduce the cost of governance, how much exactly are you hoping to save by implementing this report? So you put the number out there and let us debate it, and to see whether it will actually save the kind of money that you are saying that you save in the process. But what they are forgetting is that Oronsaye's committee report is principally about increasing efficiency of the civil service. And the idea of reducing cost is incidental, is secondary to the idea of increasing efficiency. But I hear the government saying, we'll implement the report, we are not going to sack anybody. But there are so many free riders in the civil service.
Is that possible?
That's what I don't know how that's going to happen.
Because I asked a question too, and you being you were a minister for youth development, you are a minister for youth. At some point, I think those two ministries, those two were together, Minister of Youth and Sports, Minister of Youth and Sport. And there are those who imagine that ministry has in fact gone into two different ministries now. And if you are merging youth and sport, there are staff under youth, there are staff under sport. If you're merging them, you're still maintaining the same number of staff. Their chairs and tables they will sit on are still the same. The number of cars they will ride in is still the same. If they are going to travel, they're still going to travel and sit in one seat in the plane. Yes. They're still going to spend as much as they would spend naturally if the ministries were together. So, or were apart. So the question is that, is it mathematics or I don't know what exactly what is going on?
I think somebody is telling the president that implementing the Oronsaye report is a low-hanging fruit. Politically speaking. But that is a wrong notion. It is not going to be a low-hanging fruit. Announcing that you are going to implement it won you some clapping. But when it comes to when the rubber meets the road, you find that it is a lot more complex and complicated. And there's a reason why it has been pending all those years up till today. Like you said, when I was Minister of Youth Development, I entered some offices not bigger than this table, and you find 10 people sitting around one table, not able to say, this is what we are doing here, right? You don't even know. It doesn't matter whether it didn't matter whether they came to work or not, right? So the point I'm making is that situation still exists. So if you want to use the Oronsaye report as a pathway, one, to making the civil service more efficient, then you have to be willing to confront the monster that's embedded in that. Which is you have to let people go. You have to be sure that, because you say you want to make the government more efficient, there are too many free riders. There are too many people who are in the government who are not doing anything. And that is where, but for me, like I said earlier, in strategic terms, it is not what government should be doing at this time. Why? Government is faced with the issue of political survival because of the painful decisions that government need to take to move the country forward. You don't want to add that, right? So I think whoever is telling the president that, it's one easy thing to do, I think it's something that needs to happen, but not adding that to the issue of fuel subsidy removal, the issue of Forex and Naira, then the issue of hunger in the land, then you add implementing another committee report that is likely to create losers, people who are going to lose their jobs. I think it will be too much. And government needs to be very careful, right? Now, you mentioned the issue of the APC committee on restructuring. I was actually a member of that committee, right? And
which Nasiru El-Rufai, the former governor of Kaduna State,
Excellency Nasiru El-Rufai, the former governor of Kaduna State. There were actually 9 governors in that committee, and interestingly, one of the governors is the current chairman of APC, His Excellency Abdullahi Ganduje. He was in that committee. Now, I was the national public secretary of the party at the time, and we had so many people accusing the party of not keeping its promise to restructure Nigeria, right? And we were getting this feedback. So the national chairman of the party at the time decided to take on the responsibility to say, look, this is what our party promised, and we have to do something about it. And that was the time that the idea of restructuring was assuming a life of its own, and many people were giving it their own interpretation, right? The Southeast restructuring meant a completely different thing. For Southwest, it meant a completely different thing. So the party at that time decided that, look, let us go around the country and amass people's views on what exactly they expect from us. We know what we want to do, but this is democracy, right? And that's when the Nasiru El-Rufai committee was set up. And the report was delivered in 4 months, from August 2017 to around November or so. And one of the key things that was recommended was devolution of power. In addition to so many other things, there were about 34 recommendations. But I'm particularly interested in the issue of devolution of power. Why? Because from my understanding of the APC manifesto at the time, the idea of restructuring is anchored on improving the efficiency of governance. How do we make the governance system in Nigeria function better and for the interest of the majority of Nigerians? We all say that the current federal structure is lopsided, is dysfunctional, right? So if a party is promising to restructure, it's not about breaking the country, it's not about cancelling some states or merging some states, or some of those things were hinted at. But how do we make governance function better? And one of the major conclusions is, can we move some item from the exclusive list to the concurrent list so that states will also have equal power to legislate on some of these actions, like state police, for example, like the issue of prisons. Why can't states have their own prisons? And it will also help the current, the burden that the federal government, the issue of stamp duty, registration of company. If you are going to set up a company that runs in Yobe, why do you need to come to Abuja or need the federal CAC in Abuja to register? So these were the issues that were put on the table. Now, the significant thing is that perhaps no one was in a better position to understand the significance of the restructuring that was promised in the APC manifesto than President Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
Why?
Because I remember when that report was submitted, the whisperings around was that it was a Southwest agenda. Don't forget that APC was formed by a coalition of different parties, the ACN, the CPC, the ANPP, and later we joined from PDP, right? So the people in government at the time saw restructuring as an APC or ACN agenda. And when you say as a Southwest ACN agenda, and when you say Southwest ACN agenda, you are talking of a party that was led by the current President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, right? So I think, and if you take restructuring out of APC at the time, you have very little left, right? So that is the core of the ideology of the manifesto of the APC.
So would you say that if the president needs to get something done, he needs to check that report and implement it?
Absolutely, because look, Sheil, that is the stuff that legacies are made of. Nobody remembers. Look, President Ibrahim Babangida built the third mainland bridge. He moved the federal capital to Abuja. Nobody will forget. Babangida gave Nigeria a two-party system, SDP and NRC. Right? So if you look all through history, the enduring legacies are made from social reform, constitutional reform. If you look at the history of the United States, they talk of the various amendments to the constitutions as the major milestone in the historical evolution of the country. So President Ahmed Tinubu will do well to remember that it is stuff like this that make enduring legacies. If he's able to fix power, very good. If he's able to fix healthcare, very good. And all that. If he's able to build more highways, very good. But the stuff that people will remember forever is stuff like this restructuring. So he will do well to go back to it.
Perhaps one thing I didn't discuss with you that I was going to ask you is my final question, which I probably would love you to answer maybe in 30 seconds. And it's about the Saraki factor in Nigeria's politics. It does look like it's hard. Bukola Saraki has had his challenges politically, but you are also from the school of Bukola Saraki politics. Do you see a resurgence of the Bukola Saraki politics? Just in 30 seconds, if you may.
I don't know what you mean by the Bukola Saraki politics, right?
Yeah, so if I knew in 8 years in Kwara State.
No, if you are talking about him as an individual.
As an individual.
Oh, of course,
he has his own ideology. No, he has his movement.
He's still young. And you cannot rule out anybody that is still alive. He was Senate president, right? And he has attended to the president. And as long as he's alive, as long as the Constitution of Nigeria does not place a barrier on anybody contesting, right? So and it's within his right or his power to decide what he wants to do next, right? And I think, yeah.
Is a possibility of seeing the Bukola Saraki being a president?
Well, of course it's possible. It's possible. Not only because it's constitutionally possible, it's also because as a Muslim, I believe that only God gives power. And he gives it to whoever he wills.
All right. Mr. Bolaji Abdullahi, a former Minister of Youth Development, former Minister of Youth, governorship aspirant in Kwara State, a former commissioner, and of course, a former journalist. Bolaji Abdullahi, thank you so much indeed for coming tonight. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.